A quick update on the 9-hour clock that I'm working on. So, a quick reminder, this is all based off of what the Book of Enoch says, and I'm, making a 9-hour clock because the Book of Enoch says that in, some months, there's, say, 10 hours of daylight and then 8 hours of um, night. So, and then other months it's different, but each month is equal to 18 hours. Um, and so, what Enoch is using is 18 hours in a single day, not 24. And to understand this is kind of difficult. You have to, make a clock for 9 hours. So you can it helps you to better understand, what, you know. So again, the in a 12-hour clock, it's 60 minutes to 1 hour and 60 seconds to a minute. Now, in the obviously, when you have 9 hours, uh, obviously, you have to have 90 minutes to 1 hour and 90 seconds to 1 minute. Um, and so creating the clock, you're keeping that in mind. So when you make your, just drawing it out on paper right now, draw a circle that is, and I'll show you what what I drew here on my piece of paper shortly. But you have to make sure that, so you're basically making sure that the numbers are evenly, like that's, pretty obvious, evenly spaced. And each number obviously represents 10 minutes. So from the 1 to 2, that would be 10 minutes. And then obviously, if you keep going, you are adding 10 minutes to that. I will say this. In the other video, there was, I think, maybe one mistake in that video. And so this is not just an update. This is also kind of, correcting what I said in the one thing that I said in the which I can't remember what that thing was, but I do know that I made an error. Actually, I do believe I was talking about the two dots for the 30 seconds and then like a dot one dot would be 30 seconds, and then the next dot would be another 30. And then you would have like a line for, well, that's, you can't do that. I found out because I'm learning as I'm actually teaching. So I'm learning a little bit more, and then once I gather information, like I'm getting on here and sharing it with you guys. But I'm learning as I go here. So I know I said that you would put one dot for 30 seconds and another dot for 60 seconds. Well, I found out real quick, like as I, you know, started, measuring, and I'm gonna tell you how I measured everything out, so that it's was spaced evenly. I started noticing that, from the 9 to the 1, if the 1 represented 10 minutes, I would have to have 9 dashes. For obviously 1 minute each, right? So the 9 would be 0, and then the first dash would be 1, second dash would be 2, and then 3, and so on until you came to the 1, obviously, because that would be 10. So I found out that, because of that, I found out that, it's pretty similar, really, to the 12-hour clock. So just picture, or maybe you can grab a 12-hour clock and kind of look at the dashes, and it's, pretty similar. I figured that it might look a little bit different, but actually it would look pretty similar. And it's actually, I mean, there's a few things that you'll see in this video that are going to be different with the 9-hour clock versus the 12-hour clock. And I'm going to walk you through those differences here in this video. And so I don't know how many dashes the 12-hour clock has between the 9, or between the 12 and the 1. But so that could be something that might be a little bit different there, obviously. But, you know, talking about the dashes, making a dash for every minute. For every minute. You have to make 9 of those. And that would be between the 9 and 1. So you have to, again, obviously space them, equally. Like equally space them, so that way whenever the minute hand moves, it's moving right on that, dash. And then you would do that, like, obviously all the way around. So going back to the 9-hour clock being, 90 seconds per minute. This is something that's would look a little bit different. So you know how in the 12-hour clock there's 60 seconds in a minute, and the second hand goes all the way around before the minute hand moves. Well, this is one of the things that is going to be that I started noticing right off the bat that would be different from the 9-hour clock. See, you have going back to the dashes. So the same dashes for that you use to, measure out every minute, you would use to measure every 3 seconds. So the second hand, so our, and this, so hopefully you're taking notes. So the hour hand on the 12-hour clock, it moves every second. Well, on the 9-hour clock, the second hand can only tick every 3 seconds. So again, the it's going to take 9 of those dashes: 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, and then once you get to the 1, it would be 30 seconds. So once you get to the 1, it would be 30 seconds. And then obviously when you get to the 2, it would be another 30 seconds. So it would be 60 seconds. And then obviously when you get to the 3, so what I'm doing is I'm putting numbers because I'm about to show you. So what I'm about to show you is so obviously when you go from here to here, that's 30 seconds, and then that's 60, and then look, that's 90 seconds, so that would be a minute. And that's where the minute hand would move. So instead of making a full circle, it's not making a full circle. Like obviously our clocks that we use, the 12-hour clock makes a full circle, and that's 60 seconds. Well, you just can't. And believe me, I've So I've been, studying this, trying to figure this out for some time, for quite some time. And I can tell you it's not possible. You cannot put one dash for every second. You simply cannot do that. Not in the 9 hour clock. You cannot put one dash for every second. That's simply just impossible. So it's not going to make a full circle by the time it's only going to go from the 9 to the 3. From the 9 to the 3 would be your minute. And then obviously the 3 to the 6 would be another minute. And then the 6 all the way back to the 9, that would be another minute. Obviously. So so really, okay, yeah. I'm sorry. I kind of had a thought, and you know, anyways. Um, so to measure, to get the numbers or the dashes even, uh, you have to use a ruler. Like you have to use a, like, not a straight ruler. Um, you kind of have to. It has to be like you have to. It has to be curved. Um, you're not technically you, yeah, but and then depending on the size of the circle, obviously. So your measurements are not going to be the same. Your measurements for the 9 hour clock are not, they're not going to be the same measurements, obviously. Like, and because the bigger it is, obviously, and I am in the process of getting that figured out. But the bigger the clock is, the more space between the 9 and the 1. And I'm not a clock expert, so I don't know if that's, that could be true for the 12-hour clock. I don't really know. I'm not really a clock expert. I just spent a lot of time studying you know, trying to, figure out how to, even how to create a 9 hour clock. And so, yes, this is technically what you see here it is mainly just the face 9 hour face. It, it's not, you know, this is just, you know, referencing what a 9 hour clock would look like and how it would work. Um, Obviously, again, going back to the those wheels that I showed you in the previous video, going back to those wheels, I am still in the process of, figuring out um, all of that there. Because for the minute hand, I'm going to have to get it to tick every minute. But for, and not just tick every minute, but, tick every time it goes from the 9 to the 3 to, and 3 to the 6 again, and then so on. But then not only that, like, because the second hand really cannot, it cannot move every second. It can only move every 3 seconds. That might be a little bit of an issue. So that I'm still kind of, I hadn't even started the process for that, figuring that out. I've only can update you on what a 9 hour clock looks like and, tell you, you know, again, like reminding you that it would be 90 minutes per hour and 90 seconds per minute. Because there's 3 less hours. There's, three, like from the Book of Enoch, there's obviously 3 less hours. So it makes sense to add 30 seconds to a minute and add another 30 seconds per hour. And so that's what I did. And obviously, now that I have made, and I've only just made one circle, and I quickly found out that obviously, if you make a a bigger circle, the numbers have to be, further apart. So, I still, have to kind of figure out the measurements, you know, um, and things like that. So there will be another video update once I get all that figured out. But I'm nowhere, close to. Well, I can't say I'm nowhere close. I am pretty close to start figuring out the, you know, how big, each wheel of those wheels and things like that. But I'm gonna be honest. Like I've never uh I'm not an expert at that either. I'm not an expert on how belts work, and like how they have certain wheels. Like if you have a belt, there's you know certain things that like wheels. And I do know this, that if, like, to make the belt go faster or slower, you just change the ratio. Now, that seems simple enough. Well, what if you were to reinvent the belt? Well, if you were to reinvent the belt, you would you're basically having to recreate the wheels. Same thing here. Um, Same thing. With the 9 hour clock versus the 12-hour clock, like I'm literally reinventing um, time, pretty much, to study the Book of Enoch. Like just to study the Book of Enoch, just to see, because I have made videos before where I've drawn everything out on paper, and I do have um actually a video telling you, like, depending on the month, like what time sunrise would be and what time um, sunset would be, based on the 18 hours that the Book of Enoch shows. But I hadn't, I mean, I kind of tested it a little, but like not with a 9 hour clock. Um, I've, but I have, like, I have a rough estimate from the tests that I have done. I can sit here and say that I have a rough estimate of when sunrise would be versus, you know, like on the 9 hour clock, and things like that. So I do have a rough estimate, but um, if you are somebody that has watched one of those videos and you didn't know, now you know. Those are only rough estimates. My best estimated guess as of right now. Although I'm, and this is the reason why I'm creating, I hope to create a 9 hour, fully functional 9 hour clock. So that way I can not just have a best estimate, guess. That way I can really say, hey, you know, this really works. Like right now, I would say somewhere between 80 to 90%, um the 18 hours is probably going to work better than a 12-hour clock. And I'm pretty confident. Like that's what I'm telling you here is how confident I am. Um, I've done this, so many times. I can tell you I'm pretty confident that the 18-hour clock is because see, the hour clock doesn't necessarily match, you know, how many hours of. Because have you ever counted how many hours the, from sunrise to sunset? Have you ever counted that? You know, like that's it just it does not match. And so I say this all the time that, and this is the reason why I'm doing this, is because the clock, the clocks and the calendar, both the calendar and the clock are supposed to match the um, the pattern of the sun and moon, and they do not. Um, so the and I do have a video or videos of the calendar that I use. I'll just say this real quick: the Israelites themselves even use a 364-day calendar. I mean, even in their calendar, they have 364, not 365. So that that actually, again, it goes back to say that we have been teaching people a lie. We have been teaching people a lie. Um, it's a very, very good illusion. It, like the 12-hour clock, I'm here to tell you, it's a very good illusion, but it's not true. It gets us to believe that it does match um, the sun and all of that, but it don't. Our calendar, it gets us to, believe that it follows the moon's pattern, but it don't. Like you just have to, you can't be a simpleton. You have to do the research yourself. And I guarantee you that once you get the Book of Enoch and you start to do the things that I'm doing, you're going to quickly find out that our calendar does not follow, even though it appears to be. It appears that our calendar follows all the seasons of the month and things like that, and they follow the pattern of the moon and things like that. It appears that way because it's put together so well, so good, that obviously that's how it appears. But I'm once I get a fully functional 9-hour clock, I will be making a lot of updates, and you will start to see just how accurate the 9-hour clock is, and how it actually matches the pattern of the sun and moon and things like that, where like hours, the 12-hour clock and the 365-day year calendar does not match.